Right. Welcome back to Binge Guide, the next show. I'm Andrew, and like always, we're here to help you find that next show to watch.
Absolutely. And I'm Victoria.
And today,
We're going to be doing a deep dive into the film Who by Fire.
Who by Fire? That's right. We got a lot of material on this one. That you sent us some articles from the Criterion Collection, Middlebury Campus 4 columns, even Wikipedia.
We even have a YouTube clip from Kimstem Films.
Yeah, and a short video file.
Trying to give a little bit more context to the film itself.
Yeah. So we really want to unpack this and figure out, what is this film all about? Is it worth watching? Is it something our listeners should check out? So,
Well, it sounds like a film with a lot to unpack.
yeah.
So why don't we get started with just the basic premise of the movie?
Yeah.
So Who by Fire is a 2024 Canadian-French drama, originally titled Comme in French.
Okay, and it premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival this last February.
It did, and it actually won the Grand Prix of the Generation 14 Plus International Jury.
Wow.
So an award winner already.
So that means it probably has something to do with adolescence.
Yeah, the story revolves around
some younger character.
a weekend getaway to a cabin in the Quebec forest,
Okay, so like a relaxing
a secluded area.
retreat, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds nice and relaxing. But of course, with all films like this, it seems that isolation breeds a lot of drama
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
and conflict between the characters.
Yeah, so who are the main players here? Who are we dealing with?
Well, we've got Jeff, played by Noah Parker. He's a 17-year-old aspiring filmmaker.
Okay.
He's got this kind of hero worship for an established director named Blake.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And he also has a little bit of a crush on Alyosha.
Got it.
And it sounds like we experienced the story from his perspective initially.
Okay.
Then there's Alyosha, played by Aurelia Arandi-Longpre.
Mm-hmm.
She is Albert's teenage daughter, and she's an aspiring writer working on a novel.
Okay.
She's got the writing going on as opposed to Jeff's filmmaking.
Yeah, and Albert's one of the other people on this trip, right?
Yeah. So we'll get to him in a second, but yeah.
Got it.
So she's working on this novel, and it's interesting because in the latter half of the film, the perspective actually shifts from Jeff to Alyosha.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So we get to see a little bit more about her perspective in the latter half of the film.
Okay, cool. So who is this Blake guy that Jeff is idolizing?
Yeah, so Blake Cadieux, played by Aria Worthalter,
Yeah.
he is this acclaimed director, and he actually has a history with Albert,
Okay.
who we haven't talked about yet, but he's the father of Alyosha, and there's another child, Max.
Okay, so they all know each other previously.
Yeah, they've got this history.
Got it.
And Blake has retreated to this cabin and invited Albert and his kids along.
Okay.
So Jeff initially sees him as a mentor, but as we go through these sources, it doesn't sound like that image of him holds up.
It crumbles a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Albert the father.
Yeah, so Albert is played by Paul Mamorani. He's a screenwriter, but he's currently working in children's television, which the Criterion Collection notes that he views as a step down from his earlier, more acclaimed work.
So he's a little bitter.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some bitterness there about his career trajectory.
Yeah.
And he brings his children on this trip.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely this tension, this unresolved issues between him and Blake.
Oh, so they're not on good terms even though they were invited on this retreat.
No, not really. There's
Right.
some underlying tension there for sure.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got these main characters. Are there any other people we should know about?
Yeah, so we've got Blake's editor, Millie, played by Sophie Desmarais,
Yep.
and then their housekeeper, Barney, played by Carlo Harrietha, and the cook, Ferran, played by Guillaume Laurent.
A full house.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then later in the film, they're actually joined by Helene, a former star, played by Irene Jacob, and her partner, Eddie, played by Laurent Lucas.
So even more people are coming in.
Yeah, so the tension is just building as more characters get introduced.
Yeah, so like, are things fine at first and then they devolve, or is it tense right away?
Well, the Middlebury Campus article kind of suggests that the initial atmosphere is one of leisure. There's good food, good wine,
Oh, okay.
kind of the sense of relaxation.
like a vacation.
Yeah, but it doesn't take long for those underlying tensions to come to the surface.
Right.
Sure.
They kind of bubble up, and those old creative differences between Albert and Blake resurface pretty quickly,
So they clash right away,
Yeah.
they butt heads.
pretty much setting the stage for an uneasy weekend.
Yeah, okay, so what are some of the things that start to happen as a result of this?
Well, Jeff's admiration for Blake starts to kind of crumble
Mm.
as he sees what's described as Blake's alpha male drive.
So, like, he's not who Jeff thought he was.
No, exactly.
Okay.
And the Criterion Collection piece mentions how Jeff's emotions actually seem to be reflected in the film's style. So it's almost as if his internal experience is shaping how the film is presented visually.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It's a fascinating layer. And as more people arrive at the cabin, it really becomes this pressure cooker environment. The Middlebury campus notes how these moments of levity can really quickly turn into conflict.
Yeah.
And there's this scene they point out as being quite striking, a dance sequence set to the B-52's Rock Lobster.
Wow, Rock Lobster. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so not exactly what I was expecting from this tense drama, but okay.
No, it sounds very unexpected.
So this is all taking place in the Quebec wilderness. Does that setting play a role in the film?
Yeah, it really does. It's not just a scenic backdrop. The wilderness actually seems to amplify those interpersonal tensions that we were talking about.
Okay, so it's like another character almost.
Yeah, exactly. Activities that might normally be seen as relaxing, like hunting, fishing, canoeing, they take on a different meaning because of these underlying conflicts.
So it's like the same activities, but in a completely different context.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the Middlebury campus even details a canoeing trip that goes wrong.
Uh-oh.
When the group ventures into some rapids, really underscoring how nature is completely indifferent to their little petty dramas.
Wow, okay, so the stakes are pretty high then.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the big ideas that this film is exploring? What are the themes we should be paying attention to?
Well, disillusionment and coming of age seem to be pretty central. It's not your typical coming of age story, though. It's more about the characters having their perceptions of adulthood and role models challenged.
So it's like a subversion of the genre.
In a way, yeah.
Oh.
And the Middlebury campus piece highlights a scene where Alioka discovers a rock mill in the forest, which is a site of environmental destruction that's been hidden. And the director, Philippe Lesage, has said that this is meant to be a symbol of the flaws and destructive potential of the adult figures in the film.
Also, it's like foreshadowing what the teenagers are going to experience with these adults.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also this theme of power dynamics at play. As the Four Columns review points out, this isn't just about age, it's about status and gender.
So it's looking at power in all its different forms.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And a really relevant theme, especially in today's world, is this idea of toxic masculinity.
Right.
Particularly when we look at Blake. The Middlebury campus details his dismissive attitude towards nature when they go hunting.
Okay.
And also his inappropriate behavior towards Alioka. Like, he keeps taking pictures of her even though she says no.
Yeah, that's not good.
It's not, and it definitely feeds into the teenagers' growing disillusionment with him as a supposed role model.
Right, because they're seeing this behavior that's not exactly admirable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and so we were talking about how the film shifts perspective from Jeff to Alioka.
Yeah, so the Middlebury campus points out that the first part of the film is largely through Jeff's eyes. We're seeing his disappointment and shame, but then it shifts to Alioka's perspective. And unlike Jeff, who seems to step back from his filmmaking dreams, Alioka really stays committed to her writing.
So she kind of doubles down on her art.
Yeah, she's very much driven by her artistic voice.
Okay, that's interesting because you've got these two teenagers responding to the same environment, but in totally different ways.
Exactly. It's like two different paths through disillusionment.
Yeah.
And the Four Columns review mentions this too, noting how Alioka is so dedicated to her novel versus Jeff's abandonment of cinema.
Yeah.
And there's also this exploration of different types of art in the film.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, we've got Alioka working on her novel, which is very internal. And then there's Albert, who's screenwriting.
Right.
And then you've got the more external art of filmmaking with Blake and Jeff's initial ambitions.
So it's looking at how these different forms of art relate to each other.
Yeah, and the Four Columns review even points out that the portrayal of the relationship between director and screenwriter is quite insightful.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what about the emotional side of things? Are there any other themes related to that?
Yeah, definitely the film explores emotional isolation, particularly with Jeff. You know, he's got this unrequited crush on Alioka and he feels like an outsider. The Four Columns review describes his attempt to kiss Alioka as an abject catastrophe, which really highlights his vulnerability and how he's misread the situation.
Yeah, he's young. He's still figuring things out.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the title of Alioka's novel, which is brought up in the Four Columns review, The Desire to Lose.
The desire to lose.
Yeah, it adds another layer to all of this. It hints at self-sabotage, the idea that maybe we unconsciously undermine ourselves.
Right.
Which could apply to Jeff's experiences in the film.
Yeah, so it's like this exploration of self-destruction almost.
Yeah, in a way.
Okay.
And this all ties into the theme of appearance versus reality. The idea that the glamorous world of adults and their creative endeavors might not be all it's cracked up to be.
It's like taking the mask off.
Exactly. And we
Right.
can't forget about the role of the natural environment.
Right.
The Middlebury campus describes the Quebec wilderness as breathtaking, but also points out its indifference to the human drama.
Right. So it's beautiful, but also uncaring.
Yeah. It's this powerful force that exists outside of their little world.
Got it.
So it's more than just a pretty backdrop.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the themes.
Yeah.
What about the filmmaking itself? How does it look?
Well, the Criterion Collection piece praises the cinematographer Balthazar Lab.
Mhm.
They say his work is subtly unmoored and perpetually just right.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it suggests a visual style that reflects the uneasiness of the story.
Yeah.
And the editor, Mathieu Bouchard-Malot, is noted for letting scenes play out at their own pace, which helps to build that sense of tension.
Mm-hmm.
The Four Columns review also mentions that the director Lesage uses these deep focus long takes with multiple actors in the frame.
So you can see everyone's reactions at the same time.
Yeah, it lets the viewer really observe all the dynamics between the characters without being told where to look.
Right, it's like being a fly on the wall.
Exactly.
Got it.
And then, of course, there are those unexpected musical moments like that rock lobster dance scene.
Right.
The Four Columns reviewer was very enthusiastic about that one.
Really?
They called it the finest floor show in a 2.5-hour plus art film since.
Okay, they really liked it.
Yeah, it sounds like a really standout scene.
Yeah, okay, so overall, how has this film been received?
Well, it's been really well received.
Mm-hmm.
Winning that Grand Prix at Berlinale is a big deal.
Yeah, definitely.
And critics have praised Lesage's ability to create tension out of these domestic conflicts.
Yeah, it sounds like he's good at that slow burn kind of tension.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Jordan Mincer from The Hollywood Reporter considers Lesage an underrated director.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually draws a connection between the film's title and a Leonard Cohen song,
Oh, wow.
suggesting that the characters kind of go through a baptism by fire.
They're tested by these experiences.
Exactly. And he points out that while the adults may not change much, the younger characters come out of it more mature.
So they're the ones who really grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
And Nick Pinkerton, in Four Columns, compares the film to early Denise Arcand and The Decline of the American Empire.
Okay, I don't know those. They're known for their social commentary and these ensemble casts, dealing with complex relationships in confined settings.
Okay, so it sounds like he's putting this film in good company.
Yeah, he was impressed with the film's exploration of power dynamics and that choreography of the actors, and of course that rock lobster scene.
He keeps coming back to that scene. It must be something else.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Andres Koneman of Keynote Site praised the direction and cinematography, saying that the film creates a sense of danger through the emotional intensity rather than any kind of overt threats.
Yeah, that makes sense with what we've been talking about, this kind of slow burn tension.
Exactly.
Okay, so when and where can our listeners see this film?
Well, it premiered at Berlinale back in February, and it had its Canadian premiere at Cinefest Sudbury in September.
Okay.
And it was also screened at the Vancouver International Film Festival and the New York Film Festival in October.
It's made the rounds.
It has.
Okay.
The commercial release in Canada was on December 6th, 2024. And for US listeners, it opened in New York on March 14th, 2025,
Okay.
and in Santa Monica on March 21st with a national rollout following that.
So depending on where you are, it's either at theaters now or coming very soon.
Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned that we have a YouTube clip from Kim Stim Films.
Okay.
What does that show us?
Yeah, so this clip seems to take place after a pretty significant event.
Yep.
Jeff has returned, and he's being hailed as a hero of the wolf for surviving a night alone in the wilderness.
That's interesting because the Middlebury campus mentioned that he seeks solitude in the woods at some point.
Yeah, it must be connected to that moment.
Okay.
And in the clip, Blake makes this sarcastic remark about the experience making Jeff stronger.
Oh, so he's not being genuine.
Not really. It's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but delivered with a bit of an edge.
Yeah.
It really highlights how the adults aren't exactly the best support system.
Right, they're not really there for him emotionally.
No.
Okay, what else do we see in the clip?
Well, it looks like Helene and Eddie have just arrived. They're being welcomed by the group.
Okay.
And there's this little glimpse into the family dynamics.
Okay.
The kids kind of awkwardly interrupt Albert. It just hints at those underlying tensions within the family.
Right, it's like they don't quite know how to interact with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then at the end of the clip,
They're eating venison.
oh,
Yeah.
so it connects back to the hunting.
Yeah, and maybe reinforces that idea of Blake's relationship with nature being kind of exploitative.
Right, it's not harmonious.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got one more piece of source material, that short video file.
Yes. What about that one?
Yeah, so that's a snippet of dialogue. And it's hard to say for sure who's speaking, but it sounds like it might be Blake.
Okay.
And they're talking about trying to impose yourself through force and the importance of having something to say.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line directed at a father about his children witnessing something.
Oh.
And then a remark that implies the father wasn't really around for them growing up. So it really points to some unresolved family issues, maybe even some trauma.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of baggage there.
Yeah.
And it suggests that Blake's forceful personality might be a way of compensating for these past hurts.
Right. It's like a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What's the big takeaway? What should our listeners know about Who by Fire?
Well, it's definitely more than just a weekend getaway story.
Mhm.
It's a complex, character-driven film that explores disillusionment, power dynamics, the struggles of adolescence, and the realities of adulthood.
Yeah.
And it's all set against this beautiful but indifferent wilderness.
Right.
The critical acclaim speaks to its quality, and it's definitely a film that will give you a lot to think about.
Right. And for our listeners who are looking for their next show to watch,
Mm-hmm.
this sounds like a film that will really reward their attention.
Yeah, it's got a gripping narrative, and it's full of insights into human nature.
Right.
And it's the kind of film that will stay with you long after you've seen it.
So it's not just empty entertainment.
No, it's definitely got something to say.
Okay.
And the title itself, Who by Fire, and that connection to Leonard Cohen's lyrics, it makes you question who holds the power in our lives and what kind of fire they're using.
Right.
Is it overt force or something more subtle and internal?
It's a good question, something to consider.
Definitely.
So that was Who by Fire,
Our deep dive.
our deep dive into this film. We hope this has helped you decide whether or not to add it to your watch list.
And for more recommendations and deep dives into the latest movies and shows, be sure to join us again on Binge Guide, the next show.
See you next time.
Bye!